Week 2 of the Alabama football season, and this is the highly anticipated matchup to date. Crimson Tide going down to Burnt Orange, the Lone Star State of Texas, to take on Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns tomorrow, 11 a.m. Central Time kickoff from Darrell K. Royal, Texas Memorial Stadium in Austin. ESPN's College Football Game Day will be there. Fox Big Noon will be there. A lot of action. This is the pregame show, Touchdown Alabama Magazine. I'm yours truly, Stephen M. Smith.
And I'm Patrick Dowd.
And Pat, big matchup right here. Everyone's been talking about this since the season started. The game sold out back in the summer. It's Nick Saban, it's Steve Sarkisian, it's Alabama, it's Texas. It's two story-filled programs. It's the heat. A lot to be excited about because now in week 2, we're going to kind of really truly get that chance to see, okay, where is Alabama in relation to the goal, which is a national championship?
Yeah, Alabama got off to a good start last week against Utah State, but this is really its first true test in terms of Texas because just looking up and down the roster, even though they're still young, Steve Sarkisian's entering his second year in the program, they have a lot of talent on that side of the football and a couple familiar faces, too, that some Alabama fans will recognize.
Absolutely. So let's get into this thing, Pat. So starting this thing off here with the Alabama wide receivers in this matchup, going up against the Texas secondary that gave up some big plays this past season. Now, they're a bit more improved now, but 2021 gave up some big plays. And the main guy, you look at Jermaine Burton coming over from Georgia, wasn't targeted a lot for the Bulldogs with Stetson Bennett at quarterback. But you saw week 1 against Utah State, Bryce Young going to number 3. Bryce Young going to Burton, hooking up with him for 2 touchdown passes. I like his route running. I like his speed. He was the most consistent guy, spring ball, summer workouts, fall camp. What are you looking forward to seeing from Burton in this matchup against a Texas secondary that's going to be tested by Bryce Young?
Well, you like his route running. I love his route running. I think he put on a really good display of what he can do in this Alabama offense last week against Utah State. And look, I mean, he's been here since the spring. He's got a really good chemistry with Bryce Young. And in this sort of hostile environment, you need dependable guys. And it looks like that he and Bryce are off to a really good start. And I think he's going to be really key in these intermediate throws against Texas.
Flipping this now, Pat, defensively, during the against Utah State, Alabama affected the quarterback, got to Logan Bonner, pressured the pocket some, even though it did not record the sack that it wanted to get, and Coach Saban explained why that happened during the post-game presser and things like that. But during the player interviews this week, Will Anderson spoke about, hey, it was frustrating. Chris Braswell and I, we got back there. Man, we came this close. We couldn't get him. Henry O'Toole spoke about it, but there's so much confidence in the outside linebacker room and the linebacker room as a whole that if we can get to the quarterback, we can hit home whoever is throwing the football. So this week, the challenge is Quinn Evans, freshman transferred in here from Ohio State. He had a good first game against Louisiana Monroe, facing a completely different defense. Does this group get home to Quinn Ewers often in this matchup with Texas? How do you see the defensive front in particular, the linebackers doing here in this game?
Well, although they didn't record any sacks last week, they did get a lot of good pressure on Logan Bonner. And, Utah State was getting the ball out quick. I have a feeling that Quinn Ewers and Texas are going to have a little bit different of a game plan and try to get some downfield action with their receivers. But, look, this Texas offensive line, they have two freshmen starting up front, and when you're going up against guys like Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, Chris Braswell, especially in these big shotgun set drops, I got a feeling that Quinn Ewers is going to get well acquainted with those 3 guys in this game.
Now, keeping right there with that, Pat, and then keeping with these Alabama linebackers, Bijan Robinson has been the talk all week long, and rightfully so. He's 90 to 95% of a Texas offense. Last season, 1,127 yards rushing, 11 touchdowns, averaged 112.7 yards per game, had 4 touchdown receptions. Steve Sarkisian is going to move him all over the field, whether it's out the backfield, whether it's flanking him as a wide receiver, putting him in motion. And for this Alabama group of linebackers, they've had issues in years past dealing with running backs like this, and Coach Saban mentioned it. When you talk about Henry O'Toole, Jalen Moody, Will Anderson, Chris Braswell, Dallas Turner, and then the defensive front, the guys in front of those guys on the line, how do you go about limiting, neutralizing a talent like that and forcing if someone's going to beat me, it's got to be Quinn Ewers. I cannot have Bijan Robinson beat me.
Well, I'm not in any of these coaching meetings, so I'm not going to necessarily get into X's and O's on how to stop someone like Bijan Robinson, because typically with someone of his talent, it's more just minimizing his impact. So I think just kind of almost just the basics, sure tackles, rallying to the football as much as you can, just to not let him escape and hurt you on these big plays.
Gotta be sure that you're keeping a bottle there on Robinson, because he's trying to come in here and have a marquee matchup. But going from him being a running back to Alabama's run game, an aspect that Coach Saban wants to see take another step forward in terms of, I get it, we can have the explosive plays here and there. But what about the grind at 3 and 4 and 5 yards per carry that really puts that pressure on the Texas defense, especially where the heat is concerned? And what are you looking forward to seeing from the Alabama offensive line, led by Darian Dalcourt, where getting the snap count on time, whether it's a clap count, whether it's a quad count, and then along with that, creating more opportunities for Chase McClellan, for Jahmyr Gibbs in this running back room that kind of wants to run wild a little bit here in Austin.
Well, as a whole, in terms of these 3 or 4 yard carries, I think this offensive line just needs a little bit more reps together, because they're not entirely shored up, especially on the inside at the guard positions. But look, having the snap count down is going to be really, really important, because Alabama struggled a lot with that last season. All these hostile environments. You can just go down Auburn, Florida. They had snapping issues that kept those games close. So it's going to be really important for Bryce Young and Darian Dalcourt to be on the same page. And also it's going to be important to really zero in on those 3 or 4 yard runs, because you can take the crowd out of the game just chipping away, getting these first downs, and sustaining these long drives.
The big thing here, Pat, as we go to Alabama's defense, Coach Saban mentioned it, not all the way sold on naming 2 starting corners. So it's still the 4 guys, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terrion Arnold, Eli Ricks, and Kyrie Jackson are still competing. They're still battling here. Now, McKinstry has proven to an extent that he's the most consistent guy on his side, but in the opposite end, you look at, Arnold's getting looks, and Ricks is getting looks, and Kyrie Jackson is getting looks. They're going to be tested a bit here by Quinn Ewers in this game. What do you want to see from the corners when you talk about dealing with the heat, but also dealing with these receivers, dealing with playing the football, not being fooled by the eye candy that Steve Sarkisian will present from a discipline perspective? What do you want to see from the corners here? And can Saban potentially name for 2 starters after this game?
Well, I think the biggest thing to look for is consistency in how they deal with the environment, how they deal with giving up a big play, how they respond. Because in all these, when Alabama begins conference play, there's going to be big, high-powered offenses that they go up against. There's going to be bigger plays. There's going to be some mistakes. How do they respond to those sort of things? And how do they play against some of these talented Texas receivers and running backs? So I don't really know if Nick Saban is going to be able to name the starting quarterbacks after this game. Again, I'm not in the coaching room, but it's going to be really interesting to see how consistent those other guys can play in this hostile environment.
Well, Pat, as we look at here, the line on Alabama, Texas, Coach Saban talked about that too. The line is 20 points at least. When you look at some betting sites, some even have it at 20 and a half. And Coach Saban on the Nick Saban Show Thursday night said, look, the last time we were a 20-plus point favorite in Texas, we went down and we got our butts kicked, and that was the Texas A&M matchup where Jimbo Fisher, albeit it was by 3 points, but Jimbo Fisher still got the 41-38 win. So here we go here, the same scenario. You go down to Texas, you are a 20-plus point favorite. Pat, Alabama covered the 40-plus point spread last week, but does it cover the 20-plus point spread this time around?
Yeah, I think they're covering again, because I think Texas has talent on its roster, but I think there's still a year away. There's still that year of experience away from really competing in these sorts of games. I think Alabama is going to be able, with its experience and talent, just outlast Texas here and get the 20-point cover this weekend.
So, Pat, you are covering as the Vegas man. I'm covering as well for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, I think Will Anderson and Dallas Turner, they have a field day against the Texas offensive front. And for number 2, offensively, keep your eyes on Chase McClellan. I think he is going to have a serious impact in this game. This is a homecoming for him. He talked about it. His family's from Texas, and a lot of his family wanted him to go to Texas, but he chose Alabama because it was the best place for him, the young man from Aledo High School in Texas. So there's going to be probably a split responsibility in terms of carries between Gibbs and McClellan, but I think Jays the junior can have a really big showing here as he comes home to the place where he was a part of that Friday Night Lights thing.
Absolutely. Jason McClellan, definitely a player to look out for. He's playing in his backyard. He's got to show up for the family.
Got to show up for the family there. Well, folks, Alabama, Texas on Saturday, 11 a.m. Central Time kickoff from Darrell K. Royal, Texas. Memorial Stadium in Austin. Nick Saban, Steve Sarkisian going at it. It's going to be an incredible atmosphere on Fox. Big noon for all of us here at Touchdown Alabama Magazine for the pregame show. I'm yours truly, Stephen M. Smith.
And I'm Patrick Dowd.
And people will check you next week.